So recently I crashed my drone. Now physically the aircraft still looks okay. It flies normal, the picture quality is good, just that I get this error message that says gimbal stuck. Now in reality the gimbal isn't really stuck, just that it doesn't respond to input from the remote controller. It doesn't move up or down, it just hangs in there, as you can see in the video here. It doesn't move. Now the easiest way to fix this is by changing the entire gimbal assembly, but of course it's quite expensive to replace the entire gimbal assembly. So let's see if we can be able to fix this issue without necessarily replacing the entire gimbal. Now as you can see, the gimbal is not physically broken, it is not jammed, it moves freely. So I suspect the motors are probably not the problem. The problem is likely electrical and not mechanical. I suspect the signal from the drone or the remote controller is not getting to the gimbal. That's why it doesn't move even when I try to move it with the remote. Now we have the gimbal out. I have successfully detached the gimbal and the signal flex cable. I can see micro damage on it. The cable looks brittle from what I can see, and there are tiny cracks along the lines. Now, this kind of flex cable is extremely sensitive, and during a crash like the one I had, even a small bend or stretch can break the internal fibers. So even though the cable, like I can see here, still looks connected to the motors and the camera, electrically I believe it is damaged. Right here you can see the macro damage, the tiny cracks along the electrical signal lines. Now we need to get the signal flex cable replacement. You can get this online. Depending on your location and supplier, this will cost between 30 to 50 USD. And again, I noticed that the vibration and shock absorbers were damaged in the crash. So to get the replacement for this shock absorber, it will cost approximately 12 USD, depending on your location and supplier. So rather than replacing the entire gimbal assembly, we just need to get these two damaged parts and replace them. It's economical that way, it's cost effective, rather than buying a whole gimbal assembly, take it to a technician and get him to replace it for you. Of course, most technicians would rather replace the entire gimbal than to change the individual parts that are damaged in the gimbal. But of course, if you really know what you're doing, you can diagnose the aircraft, check the parts that are broken, get them online, replace them yourself, and then you have your aircraft back. And at the same time, you would have saved some money. Alright, so I've completely removed the old signal cable from the gimbal and the camera, and our replacement parts are here already. So I'm going to be installing the new gimbal flex cable on the camera and on the gimbal. Right here you can see the old signal flex cable and the new signal flex cable. They look identical, but of course the old one is damaged internally. So at this point, let's start installing the signal flex cable on the camera first, down into the body of the aircraft on the printed circuit board. Again, let me say, anytime you're working with sensitive and delicate components such as this, you have to be very gentle. You have to align all the connectors properly. You have to make sure the cables sit exactly in the same path as the original ones. This cable tears very easily, so you must be very gentle with them. Otherwise, you may end up damaging the new cable, and then you would have wasted your money. Right here you see one pair of the old shock absorber. It's torn, so I'm removing it. The shock absorbers are simply specialized rubber materials. These shock absorbers are mounted on the left and right side of the gimbal. That's the part of the aircraft that contains the camera. While in flight, the aircraft vibrates. Now, what these shock absorbers do is that they isolate the gimbal, the part that contains the camera, from this vibration. Just like the name implies, they absorb the vibration, they dampen it so that your video or your picture doesn't appear shaky. Now we are done installing the new signal flex cable and the shock absorbers. Before coupling the aircraft completely, I want us to put the battery in and see if the gimbal responds to the controller. For me, this is the moment of truth. Now let me power the aircraft on. It's now on. Aha, as you can see, the moment I powered on the aircraft, the gimbal immediately starts its initialization sequence. This is simply the aircraft telling the motors on the gimbal to move through their full range of motion to calibrate themselves on X, Y, and Z axis. In other words, the aircraft is simply trying to check if all the motors are working normally. This gimbal initialization is automatic each time you power on the aircraft. Aha, as you can see, the gimbal is now responding in real time. It is moving up and down respectively based on my input. So this tells us that the repair is successful and that the signal flex cable was indeed a problem. So now that the repair is successful, let's couple the aircraft completely and then we go outdoor and have a test flight. Or better still, I test it one more time after coupling it completely before the test flight. It's a good culture to test your device before coupling it completely. Of course, some devices or some systems may not be able to work unless they are coupled completely. But whenever you can, whenever you're repairing a system or a device, try to test it before coupling it. I've had instances where I repaired a device or a system and then I coupled it completely before testing, and then I found out later that there are issues I still need to fix. Alright, now we've coupled the aircraft completely. Just one more screw left and then we are done. Okay, now let's power on the aircraft and the remote controller. And you can now see the aircraft initializing the gimbal, and then it is also responding to my input, moving up and down respectively. Now let's go outdoor and have a test flight. As you can see, the gimbal is responding in real time, moving as it should, up and down respectively based on my input. Picture quality, perfectly normal, everything working fine. So our aircraft has been restored to normal function. Thank you for watching. Please buy your video games at Gifted Hands Games. You can also repair your video games and your video game accessories at Gifted Hands Games. Thank you. See you next time.